Hey everybody! I didn't have time the other day in my Annecy video to actually show you some of the video footage I got, and one of my, excuse me, and one of my favorite moments that we had that we just happened across while we were in Annecy. Stick with me till the end, and I'm also going to break down why or why not we have decided to either put Annecy on our short list of places we are considering living in or not. And I'll tell you why in a complete breakdown of costs and other things. So stick with me and we will hang together in Annecy again. So I want to share with you a few of the videos that we took while we were in Annecy because it's just a beautiful place and I want to share them. First, I started taking videos just because I was fascinated of the canals. The canals and people walking around, and this first one was just us being entranced by the whole area. There were restaurants lining the canals and little stores and shops, and people just walking. The water in the canals was running pretty quickly because it had been raining so much, and it was still raining off and on while we were there. In fact, the people in Annecy were telling us that usually by that time of year, everything was covered in flowers and plant life and beautiful stuff. But this year it had been so drizzly and so cold that the flowers were late to bloom. It was still gorgeous though. Honestly, I was so entranced with the place that I forgot to film very much. I forgot to take very many pictures and I forgot to film very much. But this little clip is one where we were just walking down the street of Old Town and I was scanning around to see what was there and to show myself later and show our friends what we could see walking down the streets where people were shopping and just enjoying their day. This next clip I just had to show you. I told you before that we took a boat ride. We've realized that that's one of the most fun and easiest ways to see a coastline or a place where you go, and we regretted not doing this in France. But I couldn't help but take video footage when the boat was going around this whole little island where a chateau was sitting right in the middle. There's some scaffolding on the building. I guess they were repointing it or something while we were there. But you see scaffolding everywhere in a lot of these towns because they're really interested in preserving their historical buildings and their homes. It was just amazing to see that chateau in the middle of the lake. Even though it was raining, it was freaking amazing. It was beautiful. And we found that we weren't really minding the rain because we were just entranced with everything we were seeing. Sorry for the reflection on my glasses. It's a nice sunny day outside and I'm looking toward my big double doors to the outside. There's no way I can keep the reflection away. Maybe if I look at you this way. This next clip is just of the boat as we're moving back into dock in Annecy in their marina area. And it was really gorgeous. And I just wanted to show you the big cathedral up on the hill and I'm not looking at the camera again. Why do I do this? Anyway, I'm looking at my face in the camera, not good. So we also, I wanted to kind of show the juxtaposition of the modern with the ancient, and by showing you that modern building, and then suddenly we're looking at a giant chateau, which is in Old Town. It's in part of Old Town, so we were heading that direction. But I just wanted to show the little bit of the trip. Now the next video I'm going to show you is my favorite, and it's the last video I'm going to show you. We had finished dinner at the restaurant with the rock wall that I showed you in the last video, and we're just wandering around the streets just enjoying, and we heard music coming out of one of the many archways that you walk by and find little wonderful spots to hang out in. And we walked up and saw that there was a cafe in there called the Café des Arts, and it was so awesome. And I didn't know at the time, I've learned since then, that there are at least 5 of these in Paris and several more scattered around the rest of the country. And they're just cafes that are made for people who both want to go out and dine and also enjoy the arts. They host things like these sing-alongs that are informal and fun. And they also have art hanging on the walls sometimes and do different kinds of gallery showings and just all kinds of interesting stuff. And that is what made me go, huh, I could definitely live here. And since I found out that there are places like this all over, almost every small city or ville, even down to some villages, has this kind of just fantastic support of the arts. Now, I know that artists in France struggle too and have been struggling. I follow one in particular who's had kind of a rough year. Not many people are buying art right now because France too is having its financial instability and people are worried about finances and about affordability of things going up while pay is not. Similar. Heard anything similar here? I think so. And I'm just going to put the whole clip up and not talk over it because it was just so much fun. I thought it'd be French.
Well, the last one was. Is she coming up at you?
Yeah. They're like, we don't even know the words.
No, they really don't. There's like 3 of them that know the words. What's this from?
I don't remember. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane with me. Over the next weeks, I'm going to be doing some more armchair exploration instead of having been somewhere because I do still have a couple more videos of our trip and other places we went, and I'll be focusing on them this way too. But I'm going to be focusing on livability. So I'm going to go through my list of criteria. Well, our list. My husband is in on this list too, but the criteria that we have set up to decide if we are going to put a particular area on our short list. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to break it down. So this might be a little bit boring. I'm not sure how to split screen yet. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a little split screen of what I'm writing down, but I'm going to give it a shot. Our criteria for living somewhere is, and I'm looking down because I'm reading what I've written down. Part of our criteria is, number 1, we don't plan on having a car in France. That's one of the ways we're going to cut our expenses significantly, by not owning a car. Now, we may rent a car on occasion to go somewhere that we can't access by train or bus, but for the most part, we plan on using public transportation. So our number 1 criteria for living anywhere is, does it have good public transportation? Number 2 criteria is the cost of living. The cost of living in Annecy is quite a bit higher than the average cost of living across France, particularly for housing. It's a very desirable location. It's very close to the Alps. So in the summertime, you've got big tourist crowds coming. So there are a lot of people taking up apartment space with Airbnbs or other short-term vacation rentals. And then in the wintertime, their proximity to the Alps has people coming out for winter sports like snow skiing, snowboarding, etc. There's so much tourist attraction there that the prices significantly get booted up. I mean, why not? If you're a person who owns a business in Annecy, France, and you get a lot of tourists, who are you going to price for? If you can make a little more profit because the tourists will pay more, that's what you're going to charge. Now, in all cities in France, cost of living prices are going to differ in one city by where you are. Always living in the city center or in the old town of the city is going to be more expensive than living outside the city center. There is the lifestyle element too. If you like to eat out a lot, restaurant costs are going to be more in a place like Annecy. However, when I compare Annecy to the town nearby us, we live between a small town and a big town, but their prices are relatively the same as far as food and restaurants. So I'm going to compare the price of a 3-course meal average in Annecy according to Numbeo, which is a great place to go if you're looking for cost of living somewhere, and in Durham, North Carolina, which is right near us. One thing I forgot to do was to add my new mic. So my apologies for the first part of this video being less nice sounding than the second part of this video. I'm not going to go back and refilm it all.
Okay, with my new mic, let's talk about transportation. So I've compared some of the transportation here in the Durham Hillsborough area with some of the transportation in Annecy, but I can't compare a lot of it because I just don't know all of the ways you can get around in Annecy. And I also don't tend to take public transportation in Durham, and you could probably guess why. Okay, so public transportation in Durham, a bus is $2 one way. I used to take the bus, looping back and forth between where I was getting my master's degree and the apartment I lived in, and you could get a stamp for just paying $2 for a day. The monthly cost, I think, $25 a month, and that's pretty cheap. As far as Annecy, it's $1.76 for a one-way, and I translated from euros. I'm using dollars because most of my viewers are American and want to know in dollars. It is $78.62 a month. Now, that comes with a caveat too. It is much more costly to get a monthly pass. However, you can go a lot more places. Durham does have shuttle buses that go to surrounding towns, mostly back and forth between Durham and Raleigh. There's also a train that you can catch between Durham and Raleigh, though that's pretty pricey compared to the bus. Another caveat is that in Annecy, I'm reading this because I asked, and I asked the Googles, and it says that you can take local buses operated by Annecy's SIBRA network. I don't know what that is, but it's one of their local bus systems, and you can explore outlying areas near Annecy, including the towns around Lake Annecy and further into the mountains. The network provides frequent service to villages on both the east and west sides of the lake. And also, there is a year-round express bus that connects Annecy to another town called Albertville and stops at several hours in between. Albertville is a strange name for a French town, but I don't know where Albertville is, but I'm sure it's an express so that they can go back and forth. People who work in Annecy or work in Albertville can take a shuttle bus. To walk around, the walkability in Annecy proper is fine. If you have mobility issues or are disabled, confined to a wheelchair, we are not. And frankly, I am much more healthy and physically able to get around now than I was 9 years ago when we went. Be aware that there are a lot of cobbled streets and a lot of bumpy rides, and not all places have lifts. There is a lot of hilly territory too, because it's in the Alps, it's Annecy. Around the lake area is mostly flat. For living, it might be difficult for somebody who has pretty heavy mobility issues or is confined to a wheelchair because of the rough cobbled walks and the hilly nature of the place. Okay, so if you enjoy hiking, there are multiple hiking trails in and around Annecy, and while there isn't a dedicated trail all the way around the lake, you can walk all the way around the lake by various and sundry trails and streets. However, that's a 27-mile hike, so you better have your good hiking shoes on. Durham area too, and the Hillsborough area where we live have numerous and multiple nature spaces and hiking spaces. I have never, ever had a problem with the multitude of places we can go hiking and walking. So comparably, while they're different terrains, obviously Annecy is steeper slopes and around Lake Annecy is more flat, but up in the hills, it's they're in the Alps. So it's steeper climbs, where here in Hillsborough, we're in the Piedmont area, which has small mountains. They're really just tall hills. So there are steeper places that you can hike, but most of it is just rolling hill terrain. And around the rivers are relatively flat. Now let's talk about marketplaces. Annecy does have supermarkets, but they also have several open air markets throughout the week. And I'm going to turn my head so I can read them to you. Market days in Annecy in Old Town Market are Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. The stalls are set up in the historic streets of the old city. And I believe we ended up at one, I can't remember what day of the week it was, but we happened by one of them that was mostly food. And they run typically from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Tuesdays, the market is exclusively for food. So I'm wondering if maybe that wasn't the day that we went, because all I remember seeing is food. On Fridays and Sundays, in addition to the food, There are also textile and manufactured goods sold in the Old Town Market. There are other Annecy markets around town. The Old Town Market is going to be more expensive. You can still get some affordable vegetables there, but it's going to be more expensive because it is a very touristed area. So they can charge more. That's the nature of the beast when you live in a tourist trap, or not a tourist trap, a tourist town. They have other Annecy markets that are less expensive, that are not in Old Town. There's one called the Boulevard Tin Market, and it has food, textiles, household items. Sometimes at the end of the month, in the Old Town, there's a big giant brocante, which is an antique and stuff market where people can go and search out little wonderful tchotchkes or furniture even for their homes. And the last Saturday of the month, there's an art and designers market that's held along another group of streets. So that's really cool. I like that. Being an artist, it's nice to know that there are arts and designers markets out there too. If you happen to visit Annecy or any other town in France, many of them do take cards, but many don't. So you want to take cash with you in the form of euros. You want to have cash with you for some vendors because some of them are not credit card capable. I feel like you were so close up in my face, it was scaring me a little bit. I was scaring myself. So I backed you up a little bit because, yeah. So let's talk about affordability with rent, for example. We don't plan on purchasing anything, at least for the first year. We want to know how comfortable and how much we love our community. I've heard stories from too many people who bought a house in the French countryside. Their home might have been the perfect home that they felt really great when they walked into, so they decided to buy it. But that doesn't mean the location is your ideal location. So you want to make sure that you're purchasing a place that fits your lifestyle, that fits what you want. My husband and I want to live in an area where we can walk out our door and walk to get groceries or walk to the nearest boulangerie or a cafe or a park to meet friends. We want to be in the action, not living out in the countryside because we don't have a car and we don't like the idea of being isolated. We live out in the country right now. And in America, you don't really get to know your neighbors very well. And some places in France, you don't either. So anyway, let's talk about rent. I'm getting my averages off of numbeo.com to compare rents. So let's look at rent per month. A one-bedroom apartment, and in Durham, for the last 5 to 10 years, prices for rent have skyrocketed, which is why 8 years ago, my husband and I decided to, and if you hear noise in the background, that's because it's a Saturday and he's working in the background and doing stuff around the house as well. So for a rental apartment in Durham City Center, the average right now is $1,850. That's a lot for a one-bedroom in Durham City Center. For a three-bedroom in Durham City Center, it's $2,700 a month on average. And now the square footage in Durham is going to be larger than in France, no matter where you are. And remember, this is Durham, North Carolina, not Durham, England. I'm sure you can tell by the accent. In the city center of Annecy, compared to the 1800 to 1900 in Durham, a one-bedroom apartment in the city center in Annecy is $960 on average. Not too bad, not too shabby. Remember, it's probably going to be about 700 square feet on average for a one-bedroom apartment in the city center. And then for a one-bedroom outside of the city center, compared to $1,400 in Durham, and that's South Durham where we used to live, that's where rents are right now, anywhere from $1,400 to about $1,400 for one-bedroom apartments. In Annecy, outside the city center, is about $750 on average. And so that's a significant difference as far as dollars. Again, it's going to be a smaller place. The square footage is going to be smaller, but the price is going to be much less. For a three-bedroom apartment in the city center, I said it was $2,700 on average. It's $2,300 on average for a three-bedroom in city center in Annecy, which is still pretty costly. And mainly because three-bedroom apartments are hard to come by, they're rare, and so only someone who can afford that price is going to be living there. A three-bedroom apartment outside of Durham City Center, so in the suburbs, is about $2,300 to $2,400 a month. In Annecy, outside of the city center, it drops significantly to $1,700 to $1,800 a month to live in a three-bedroom house or apartment outside of the city center. So the livability factor is pretty good because we would be living outside the city center. So we would be able to pay that amount monthly for our apartment. We'd probably end up getting a two-bedroom, which would be somewhere in between those costs, I suppose. So let's talk about dinner out. In Durham, The average cost of a meal for 2 people at a mid-range restaurant, not a super pricey restaurant, at a mid-range restaurant, 3 courses, that's an appetizer, a main, and a dessert, runs about 75 bucks. Now, you have to account for the fact that you're going to be paying a 20% tip on top of that 75 bucks, which brings you to $90. And there lies the difference. It's not very different costs in many places in France. It is significantly different in some towns. But in Annecy, the average cost for a meal for 3 courses is about $70.50. The difference lies in the fact that you're not paying a 20% tip on top of that. They're not a tipping culture, though it is perfectly fine if you feel that you got really good service to throw a couple euro on the table to as a tip, as a thank you for the good service. Now, if you're talking McDonald's, and I think there is one in Annecy, average McDonald's meal in Durham is 10 bucks. An average McDonald's meal in Annecy and most places in France is about 13.50 for the same meal. Same quality, same, ugh. So just go somewhere else and pay the same amount for way better food. Get a tartiflette somewhere else and you will enjoy the heck out of it and pay about the same price. A glass of wine in Annecy is going to be quite a lot less than a pour you would pay for in Durham. It ranges where you happen to be, but if you're in a mid-range restaurant and order a glass of red wine, for example, Cabernet, let's just say Cabernet, you're going to be paying anywhere from $9 to $15 for a 5-ounce pour. If you order the same type of glass of wine, the same Cabernet at a mid-range restaurant in France, almost everywhere in France, you're likely to be paying more like 4 to 10 euro for a much bigger pour. Okay, a loaf of fresh bread in Durham is going to cost you about $4.12 at the grocery store. At somewhere like a communal market where we live nearby, a loaf of really good sourdough runs around 7 bucks. In Annecy, a loaf of fresh white bread at the market is going to run you about a little under $2. Most other groceries, a lot of other groceries can be very similar in price, though rice has gone way up in Durham and around us because a lot of the rice farmers in the US are having a lot of trouble because of tariffs and because of cuts to their funding. And they were the biggest suppliers to USAID of rice, and USAID got cut. So those people aren't getting fed American rice anymore, and it's hurting American farmers. Fresh eggs in France vary depending on where you are. In Annecy, a dozen fresh eggs are about $4, and in Durham, a dozen fresh eggs are around $5.50, and that's grocery store eggs, the good eggs at the grocery store. The farmers markets, they tend to be a little bit higher these days, though our local farmers market goes from $5 to $7 a dozen for fresh off the farm eggs. Poultry, meat, those types of things between Annecy and Durham are about the same. So you're paying about the same cost for those kind of items. I suppose the difference is that while you may not be getting local to Annecy beef, for example, you will be getting French beef. So it is semi-local. France is a country about the size of Texas. So it would be like, even if it was from the other side of France, it's still just a state away. So it's mostly fresher and not on factory farms. So it is better for the animals and better tasting meat because it's almost all grass-fed. And so while the prices are about the same, the quality changes. Same with vegetables. If you go to a market, even if here, you go to a farmer's market and get strawberries, they're going to taste better than the store strawberries because they're not mass produced. In France, their fresh strawberries, from what every American who's moved over there says, are even better, are just the most juicy, wonderful things they've ever tasted, and they can't wait till strawberry season in the spring. So vegetable and fruit produce usually is quite a lot less depending on where you are in France, but it's grown nearby, so you're not paying all the transportation fees and all of the trucking fees to get the food to the market that you shop in. So those are our basic criteria for can we live there. There are other things too, like are there places nearby that we would like to go eat? Is there good eating there? Is there a variety of food there? France does have a problem with one certain genre of food, or actually more than one in some places. In Paris, you can get almost anything. But in other places, it's really hard, from what I understand, to get a decent Mexican or Tex-Mex meal. So you'll want to hoard those kinds of Mexican spices, and you'll want to hoard that kind of stuff and learn to make your own. Electricity, heating, cooling, utilities, etc., are about the same. They average about $230 to $270 a month in either place. However, your mobile phone is going to be significantly less. Most people who have a mobile phone get at least 10 gigabytes of data, costs about $16 compared to one person getting a mobile phone here, which averages around $60 to $70, and that's for 10 gigs of data, not unlimited data. Internet is also much more affordable in France. It's different depending on the area you live in, but high-speed internet in Durham, we're paying $80 a month right now for fiber. In Annecy, the price is more like 35. So again, those are some big cuts in costs, especially if you work remotely and need an internet connection. That's a big expense. Now, the cost of clothing, if it's a chain clothing place like H&M or Zara or something like that, you're going to pay a lot more for clothing in France in general. There are thrift stores all over the place in multiple towns, so I plan to shop at thrift stores as much as I can, though at my size, which is slightly plus still. It's more difficult to find plus sizes in France, even now, even though not every person in France is skinny. Let me just tell you that. So plan on paying significantly more for clothing, no matter what size you are, because it just costs more in France. For example, one pair of jeans like Levi's, for example, are about $63 to $65 here and about $112 to $115 in Annecy. Those are the kinds of things to look out for. We have a lot more of the discounted sales and discount markets. I'm sure that France has some of those discount chains and markets. I know that there are even a few Costco's in France now where you can get your clothing significantly cheaper, but it might not be the style you want. That's kind of our breakdown. We want to live in a place that's walkable. We want to live in a place that as we grow old, we want to know that we'll still be able to get around there as we get older. We want to make sure that we can afford to live there as far as rent and groceries. And it's certainly more affordable, even in Annecy, which is much more expensive than a lot of other towns because of its tourism. Even there, it's much more affordable than it is here. Almost virtually anywhere except Paris is going to cost less than it costs to live here. Even Lyon, which is quite expensive, is still less costly to rent a place than here, and for groceries and all the things. Mostly housing, though, is such a big dip in costs in most places. What did we decide about Annecy? Is that on our short list of a place that we could live? We're probably going to say no to that, partly because as we grow older, we're not sure we want to have to navigate snow and ice and cobblestones and steep slopes. So that's probably not for us. However, we will be visiting a lot because it's fabulous. Let's just face it. As far as that, and rent, while it is more affordable than here, is less affordable than many of the other beautiful towns that we've been exploring, armchair exploring, I'm going to say. We probably will not have that on our list of places to live unless for some reason one of us happens to get a job offer living there. It's the same with a city like Lyon. It's a little too big for us and it's pricier than a lot of places, still less than here, but pricier, has great public transportation. But the only reason we will actually live there is if my husband gets a job and has to go work on location at that job. Otherwise, there are much more affordable places to live with really good public transportation, and that's what we need. We're not ruling Annecy out completely. We are ruling it out as one of our top 10 places that we'd like to live. It's not on that list, mainly because of the ability to get around without a car. And as we said, growing older, slipping on ice and falling and breaking your hip is not an idea of something I'd like to have happen. But anyway, so that's the rundown for today. We're just going to try to keep it simple. It's long enough. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of stuff, and I hope to see you again soon. See you later.